watching Capitol Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
The first 100 days of Governor Pritzker's administration started with a celebration, a coronation, if you will, and even a concert from Maroon 5 at the inaugural ball. The second 100 days of the Pritzker administration started very different, under a cloud of federal investigation. Federal investigators telling WBEZ anonymously that they are investigating the Pritzker's tax breaks for the mansion next door in the Gold Coast of Chicago, one of the more luxurious neighborhoods of Chicago there. That discovery, though, did not appear to rattle the governor. At a Wednesday press conference, he downplayed it and appeared to recruit the sympathies of his political allies, painting it as an issue that's already been decided by the people in November's election.
I'm very confident that any review of this matter will show that all the rules were followed. I have not been contacted by any law enforcement, neither has MK. I will say that last October, my opponents raised this issue, and it became a political subject last October.
And for reaction, we turn now to Republican State Senator Dale Ryder from Mattoon, who joins us remotely from our studios in Champaign. Senator, good to have you with us.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be with you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Senator, I do want to ask you for your Republican perspective on the first 100 days of Governor Pritzker's administration in a moment. But before we do, I wonder, you were a prosecutor, of course, and I wonder what your perspective is on this issue of Governor Pritzker now being under federal investigation. There were, of course, those members of Congress, the Republican members of Congress, who asked the U.S. Attorney's Office to look into this issue back in September, October, right before the election, about these property tax breaks, asking whether or not this was perjury or fraud. Does the awareness or the discovery of a federal investigation somehow change how you view this or how the public should view this, in your opinion?
That's hard to say, Mark. I mean, now it appears from if the reports are accurate that the federal government's involved. I mean, I remember when the story first surfaced from the Inspector General's report in October before the November gubernatorial election, and I can remember my reaction and others' reactions to the story, and then hearing the governor's denial. I think that some people were prompted to ask the question of if there wasn't anything wrong here, why was a check cut to Cook County government? I mean, if someone came to you and said, well, you owe me $10 and you didn't owe him $10, would you give him a $10 bill? And that was the reaction from a lot of my constituents and the voters. Whether or not that affects what is going to be a very, very heavy legislative agenda that's filled with almost all of the governor's proposals remains to be seen.
I also wonder, how do you think this might impact the governor moving forward? There was a Chicago Sun-Times editorial piece that said they suspect a setup, in their words, that the leak of the knowledge of this federal investigation was put out to intentionally hobble the governor just at a time when he needs all the political capital he can get to push through several of his big agenda items, many of those still remaining unresolved. Do you think this will have that effect? Does this make it harder for Democrats to go along with Governor Pritzker, the discovery that a federal investigation is underway?
Well, in answer to your first question, Mark, I mean, this notion that the Sun-Times thinks there's a conspiracy, I mean, I don't know what evidence they might have that it's a conspiracy. Remember, this was first leaked not not a few days ago, but it first came out last October. Now, the notion that now the federal government is involved, or the U.S. Attorney's Office apparently, and is investigating, that is somehow politically motivated. I mean, I guess we can all say that there's a conspiracy out there, and for some people, the best evidence that there's a conspiracy is that there's absolutely no evidence of a conspiracy. So I don't know what the Sun-Times is bringing to the table in that regard. Regardless, I mean, the governor's proposals are out there, they're on the table, and I do believe that the overwhelming majority, if not all the members of the General Assembly, are going to make their comments and cast their votes based on the merit of the proposals and not what the Sun-Times or someone else might be saying.
How would you characterize the first 100 days, the direction of the state of Illinois under Governor Pritzker's lead?
To increase the minimum wage, particularly by that much, I mean, it's almost doubling it for downstate. That's economic loss for my district as a whole, and it will be across the state. Mark, the last time Illinois raised the minimum wage in 2006, the very next year, this state lost 50,000 jobs. The prediction this time is we'll lose 90,000 jobs. I represent a district that sits on the Illinois-Indiana line. This will make it harder, even harder, for us to compete. This will ultimately raise prices and will drive consumers over into Indiana. Over 50% of retail stores sit within 20 to 25 miles of a state border. It'll be exceedingly easy for people to choose out-of-state retailers if business owners, in order to deal with the minimum wage increase, are required to raise prices. And unfortunately, that economic logic, which has been proven time and time again, fell on deaf ears with both the governor and Democrat legislators.
The governor also listed his proposals or his promotion of his progressive income tax, what he calls a fair tax, as one of his accomplishments. Of course, that's not completed yet and would not be until the people may get a chance to vote on it on a ballot in November of 2020. But there's still a fight in the Senate. The Senate Executive Committee cleared it. That means the Senate will get a vote on that issue probably when you get back. I expect you're voting no, but do you think there's any shot that Republicans might convince enough Democrats in the Senate to halt this, or is this a done deal in the Senate and left to the House?
I think there's a chance for that, but obviously, as you know, Mark, I mean, the Democratic majority in the Illinois Senate is very large. There's 40 members. There's 19 Republicans. And as we saw with the minimum wage issue we just discussed, I mean, there were Senate Democrats who were somewhat reticent about the minimum wage. They were hesitant about that. But in the end, the governor said this is what he wanted, and he had some political heavyweights, including the president of AFL-CIO, individually calling members saying this is what we want as well. And in the end, every Democrat voted for it. I suspect you may see somewhat of a repeat of that with regards to the constitutional amendment. You have to have 36 votes. You have to have a 60% majority or 3/5 majority in order to pass a constitutional amendment proposal out of a chamber. The Democrats would be able to lay off 4 votes and still be able to do that. I mean, for people who believe in a flat tax, and I'm in that category, or those who also believe that going to a graduated system would make it much easier for the state to raise taxes, and that's the evidence from what we've seen around the country with the states that also that already have graduated systems. The chance to beat this is going to be at the ballot box, and that happens in November of 2020.
There are some more immediate impacts to this year's state budget still on the line. That progressive income tax fight a long way off. The one that Republicans seem to be coalescing around the most is this issue of shaving off roughly $1 billion, the state contribution to the pension systems. We've spoken about this in the news cycle some in the past, but I wonder, what do you think the chances are that that passes, and how do you evaluate that plan, that proposal that Governor Pritzker and former Comptroller, now Deputy Governor Dan Hines have proposed?
It's the fact that, Mark, this idea has been tried several times before. Rod Blagojevich did it in 2003. The Democrat legislature and still Governor Blagojevich did it again in 2006, 2007, and 2008. Look, pension skipping is a horrible idea and ultimately puts the debt for this pension system on the backs of the next generation of taxpayers. The governor wants to skip $900 million in pension payments. The experts, the actuaries for the systems will tell you that for every $1 you don't pay in today, you'll pay $3 out ultimately. So the governor is proposing that we borrow $900 million in exchange for a $2.6 billion debt just for this year. That's just for this year. That's a horrible deal. That's a horrible deal for taxpayers. It was when it happened in 2003. It was when it happened for 3 years in a row, a few years after that, and it would be a horrible deal today. I think that in terms of what's at stake for the next generation, skipping the pension payments is perhaps among the most dangerous proposals that are out there.
Governor Pritzker has also called for legalizing things that aren't currently legal to raise new tax money too, things like marijuana, sports gambling, and expanding current gaming in the state. I wonder where Republicans are. Where are you on those issues? Could the state of Illinois legalize marijuana? Would you support that? Would you support the idea of legal sports gambling? Where are you on these ideas?
I'm not sure about the sports betting proposal, Mark. I haven't seen the details of what the governor has in mind. I think there's a lot that goes into that, and there needs to be conversations about that. I'm opposed to the proposal the governor's put on the table with regards to recreational cannabis. The facts are this, that there is a large and growing body of credible studies, including some that appeared in medical journals, that establish a causal relationship between long-term and heavy use of cannabis and psychosis. In other words, that long-term and heavy use of cannabis helps breed mental illness. I mean, the studies are there, and there's this narrative out there that's been put forth by the marijuana legalization lobby saying, oh, it's not harmful at all, or it's less harmful than alcohol. The scientists say something entirely different. And in a day and age when we see violence in our society, and most of that violence, particularly to the extent that it's perpetrated with firearms, is being perpetrated by people who have a measure of mental illness, do we really want to step forward and say, we're going to make this a legal product so we can get some tax revenue off of it, understanding that that probably will lead to an increase in mental illness down the road? I think that in terms of substantive policy, setting aside budget issues, this is a very dangerous proposal, and we need to insist upon a lengthy conversation about the science. I mean, one of the things that my Democratic friends like to say all the time is, hey, let's follow the science. Okay, let's follow the science. The science demonstrates that this is dangerous.
Well, we are approaching that budget deadline, and this is the time where horse trading starts to happen, negotiations behind closed doors. I know you're familiar with the process, how all that works, how the sausage is made, if you will. I wonder, if you say no to all those things that Governor Pritzker proposed, how do you expect to have bargaining power at the table when it comes time to distribute the funding for the capital bill program? Governor Pritzker has promised a downstate revitalization, but how do you go claim a portion of that or carve some of that off and make sure that your district gets enough a slice of the pie when it comes to the capital and infrastructure developments? Do you have any clout in those discussions?
You know, that's a good question, Mark, and that'll be up to the governor and his administration. I mean, I am charged with representing my constituency and doing what I believe is in the best interest of my constituency and the state of Illinois. The other 176 members of the General Assembly are charged with exactly the same duty. Now, I've not been in the meetings. What I've been told is that in the Capitol meetings for a statewide construction bill that you're referencing, that the governor's staffers have been quoted as saying, you know what, if you don't vote for some of these policies, or you don't vote for the tax increases to fund this, then by golly, you can look forward to getting nothing in your district. I hope that that's just bluster. I hope that that's just talk and it's not actually the attitude of the administration. In the end, past administrations or elected officials who have taken that attitude things have wind up usually not working out well for them. Let's put it that way. So I think that's the wrong attitude. Again, I hope that's just the staff talking and not evidence of the governor's attitude himself. The governor said he wants to come to Springfield and bring people together and do things in a bipartisan way. Taking the tack that you've suggested and what I've heard so far is not being constructive. It's not bringing people together, and it's certainly not bipartisan.
All right, Senator Dale Ryder joining us remotely from our studios in Champaign. Senator, thank you for joining us. And we're back in just a moment with another look at the so-called Fight for 51, why some downstate conservatives want to divorce Illinois from Chicago.